All right. I'm excited to be here today with a new friend, Adam Stark. So Adam, he's the co-founder and head of technology at MiMU Gloves, innovating wearable tech that allows musicians to control sound and visuals using hand gestures. He's an expert in music technology and human-computer interaction, with a PhD focusing on intelligent musical analysis for live performance. He's a collaborator with artists and technologists. He helps develop tools that enhance expressiveness and creativity in music. So I'm excited to have him on here today to talk a little bit about MiMU Gloves and the tools that he's built for artists to be able to express themselves in innovative ways. And looking forward to just hearing his perspective and thoughts on where things are headed right now with technology and what the future of creativity looks like. So, Adam, thank you so much for taking time to be on the podcast today.
I'm pleased to be here. Yeah, very nice.
Awesome. So, maybe we just dive right into it. I'd love to hear a little bit about your background and sort of creating MiMU Gloves and how it was inspired and what was kind of like the biggest reason that you created the company in the first place.
Sure. So yeah, my background is in, so I'm both a musician and a computer scientist, and I studied computer science, but always kind of made music myself, at the same time. And I then merged those two things. I did my PhD in effectively like using computers to learn about live performances and how computers can respond more intelligently and sensitively to artists in live performance. So can they understand, what the beats are and what the chords are and actually interact with the musicians in those ways? And a little bit later on, so the MiMU Gloves themselves. So I'll just sort of say what they are to begin with. So they are these wireless, wearable, gestural musical instruments and performance tools for artists. So the idea is really that artists can control electronic sound with the same degree of expression that they can, control acoustic instruments, right? So that they've got all of the sort of physicality of acoustic instruments, but all of the amazing power of electronic sound. So that's what they are. But so to sort of explain then how they came about. So they came about from an artist called Imogen Heap. So she's reasonably well known. It sort of depends where you are.
I've seen the gloves. I've seen videos. Really cool. Wow. So that's MiMU Gloves.
Yeah, that's right. And so this was about 2011. She's if you've ever seen her live, she's got loads of different things on stage. She'll have like loopers and sort of synthesizers and a piano and several other instruments. And she really wanted a way to be able to sort of access all of this sort of multi-instrumentation that she has, but also in a really kind of expressive way. And she had this idea about the gloves, and she started to pull a team of people around her, starting with a guy called Tom Mitchell at the University of the West of England. And they worked on a sort of prototype, and then that went well. And Imogen started to bring a team together of really varied team of sort of textile designers, electronics engineers, computer software people. That's sort of my kind of speciality. And this sort of really kind of diverse team kind of came around, and we built this first pair of gloves for Imogen specifically as an artist. So that's where it came from.
Wow. Super cool. The first thing my mind goes to is we interviewed Nolan Arbaugh on the podcast a few months ago. Nolan's the first Neuralink patient. So he's quadriplegic and he has a brain interface installed that basically was on the podcast. We created the first song telepathically using his Neuralink and AI. And what I'm hearing you say right now with the gloves is, that there's this like instrument that with acoustic instruments, we have the ability to express at a very high level of articulation with our hands because we have so many neurons devoted to our hands. And so you've been able to map an instrument to be able to allow artists to actually express and probably map these parameters to these gloves so that they can actually bring that level of articulation to electronic instruments.
No, definitely. And I also like to think of it is like, so that the musicians are one kind of group of stakeholders in this relationship, if that makes sense. But the audience are the other one, right? So the audiences have been, I don't want to sort of lay into electronic music tools because loads of them are amazing, but but most of them are very like tabletop, look down at some buttons and sliders, and you're operating a machine, you're not performing. So for an audience to see somebody physically really interacting in the way we look at a drummer play, or the way that we look at a cellist play, for an audience, it's great to see somebody physically interacting with sound rather than operating some kind of machine on a surface, which is cool, but it's also very, very, it's been done.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of makes sense. Like when you think about like expressiveness itself, and like what are like the parameters through which like humans can like perform and like express themselves. Voice certainly feels like one of, if not like the primal ones, where you like you can really express so much through your voice. But it does seem like a full body type of expression. Your hands is a great place to like focus, because like it really is where, I don't know, like I've seen images, maybe you've seen these too, or shows a picture of how our body parts are actually like what they would be sized in proportion to the amount of neurons that we have. And our hands are like massive, and then our faces are like big, and then the rest of it's just like there's very few like neurons with it. So I'd imagine that hands, by mapping an instrument specifically to those, like you can really unlock a lot of expressiveness through it.
Definitely, and artists are doing this with their hands anyway. Particularly if they're singing, that your hands are already there being expressive quite a lot of the time. So often it's about just capturing that sort of expression and allowing people to use it to do interesting things.
Cool. I'm not gonna lie. As soon as you like described the concept of what you've built, I'm like, how can I buy this? Is this like, is this like a product that's like for sale? Is it custom built, or like how do these gloves work?
They are for sale. So I mean, we are 12 years into this, from the kind of first gloves that we made for Imogen, and we've just released the sort of version 2, second design of these gloves, and they're available now. We launched them literally about a month ago.
Wow.
And so we're going to be shipping them to the first set of artists who want to use them later this year. And we're really excited about that. I mean, it's taken like years of learning that we've now put into this new design, and we're really proud of it. It's awesome. It's going to be so many different artists doing different things. It's going to be great.
Cool. Well, congratulations. Yeah, I'm sure a lot of energy and love and resources went into creating this next design. Out of curiosity, so I'm wondering how the gloves map like on a software basis. Like I'm assuming that. Well, yeah, I'm sure like that you sync these up with an app on the computer. Is that those linked to like DAW? Is it like a plugin, or like how does it like work in practice?
Yeah, so the gloves measure the bend of your fingers and the orientation of your wrist, and then they send all of that data to the computer by Wi-Fi. And the software that receives them is our own piece of software. It's called Glover, and this basically is it's the creative tool for gesture, right? So the idea is that each musician can connect their gestures on the one hand to whatever sound or synthesizer or audio effect or whatever it is they want to control on the other. And they can make these connections. So it's really a kind of mapping tool for making these gesture to sound connections. And they can make collections of them as well, save those collections, and then make another one and switch between them. So this really gives the artist the power to decide what each of their expressive movements do in terms of sound control. And you can imagine another world where we decided it would be a simpler version. Every time you make a given gesture, that would always be increased reverb or whatever. And it would be really cool, but then it would be incredibly boring straight away, because once you've seen it, you'd sort of seen it. But now with this tool, it allows the artist to basically define whatever gesture sound relationship they want. And very often, if I see artists performing, I have no idea how they're doing what it is they're doing on stage with the gloves, because they've got their own kind of mappings between their gestures and whatever kind of kit they're using on the other hand, whichever software or music hardware or whatever.
Interesting. So am I hearing you right that you're saying that with these gloves, you can create custom mappings so that you can really assign it to how the gestures map to things on the computer, and Are you saying that as well? Like, does it usually come with one glove, or it can potentially come with two gloves, and then you can use one glove for like context switching, and then the other glove for like actually like mapping like the parameters, or how does that work?
Or you combine the gestures for both. So one can be kind of like a switch for the other. So you might say, oh, if, I want to do something with the roll of my wrist like this when I pinch, but if I'm making a fist, that's going to do one thing. And if I'm doing a one finger point, well, this is going to do another thing. So it can be,
wow.
It can basically, you can build these layers of contextual control over your sort of synthesizers, your audio effects, and so on.
Wow, man, I can imagine that functionality being, really useful for like expressiveness, for like music performance, but also just like gestures in terms of just like our day-to-day life, like, in terms of like smart, devices. Obviously we have like, voice mode activation for some things, but like having that level of customization of parameters where you could actually interface directly with your devices just by creating a specific like gesture, especially for like when I think of like sign language and things like that. It seems like that's a really powerful use case.
No, definitely. And I think that one of the, obviously, it means that to create something good, there is some setup time there, because you have to be experimenting with these gestures, and you kind of have to, it doesn't take very long, but you need to learn the muscle memory of that. But once you've done that, the whole software thing disappears, and you're able to just really use this muscle memory to access all of this stuff, right at your fingertips. So it's
wow,
exciting.
That's really cool. I'd be interested to hear your perspective on, like, as an expert at mapping gestures to expressions, and like mapping like human creativity to like computer expressions. Coming back to that conversation that we had with Nolan around how, we did like a very like primitive version of when we say like created a song telepathically. It was really just like him using his Neuralink to go to Suno to like generate a song, which is very cool, cool. But it's a little bit different than like mapping his Neuralink to all these different parameters and literally like creating a sound just with his Neuralink. I'm curious if you think there's a world where we have that level of like binding between something like a neural interface and the tools that you've built, that like an artist could literally be just like imagine a symphony and then like play a symphony with their thoughts.
I do think that's an incredible application, and I know that also, as you've described, there are, for some artists, this is potentially their only way to make music at all. So I do think it's incredibly impressive, but I also, our focus is kind of largely on trying to make, we sort of call it like transparency. This is sort of what it's known as in the, it's the transparency of action and result, if that makes sense. So that one of the problems with a lot of electronic sound is that stuff is happening and it's coming out the speakers, and you can't really see what has caused that to happen. Like, is it just a recording, or am I watching a live performance here? And so what we're trying to do with the gloves is to give people a way to make the consequence of their actions incredibly transparent and explicit, so people can see that this is, they're watching something being created in front of their eyes. And that's not to say that a sort of brain interface type approach is somehow invalid or not worth it. But the focus of our work really is on trying to make that clear. And I think with a brain interface, that becomes quite hidden away. But again, it has its really important use cases.
That absolutely makes sense. Yeah, maybe we can just like hack into their brains and then sorry, dart. It definitely brings up like interesting questions around that type of technology and the ethics and sort of like the security risks and whatnot. But I guess we'll cross that bridge if and when we come to it. But so I guess maybe in a world like that, where you could control things there, like to visualize it, you would want to have some kind of interface where you could also visualize like their brain, or you could see like what they're thinking about. What I'm hearing you say is that one of the best parts about this tool that you've created is that it not only allows you to control those parameters, which often like this is what electronic artists are doing, is they're doing amazing things. But when it's not visible, or when you're not able to like portray that in a way that the audience can like see, then it kind of loses its impact. It loses its effect because we don't see anything happening and they don't know if it's recorded or not. Whereas with these gloves, you have the ability to actually perform and actually portray and express, with your full body in a way that brings, those things to life, like they weren't able to have before.
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, I think on like doing a sort of the sort of brain interface thing, I think the way you described it is great. Like to make that performative in the way that we're talking about with the gloves, is you would add some sort of visualization. I think that's be how I would approach it. But yeah, it is about showing people that something's being created in front of their eyes, and this was a thing that we've always slightly had a problem with the gloves, is that when someone's performing with it really well, people are like, oh, okay, this is interesting, this is cool. But when it breaks, they go, oh wow, like this was actually real. Like this was actually happening, and they understand that actually everything they've been seeing was true, if that makes sense. So a sort of paradox was that it was only when it failed publicly, people realized that it was that it was actually happening and not just somebody dancing along, if that makes sense. So.
That's interesting. Yeah. I mean, it's almost a little bit like using the force, with like your hands. And it's like, yeah, like if you're using magic or something, then it's almost like invisible or it's intangible. So that moment where you can actually see there's a disconnect there, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That is an interesting idea of like, even if it's not like a brain interface, having like a visualizer that shows all the mappings of what parameters are being controlled and how they move in like a space, like a 3D space. I don't know if that's something you guys have explored, or if there's creative ways people could do that with something like Blender. If they like also mapped, the parameters, not only to like the music or the audio, but like to like a 3D render or something that like moved in space along with those same properties.
Yeah, no, we've got several artists who've done exactly that.
Wow,
so
cool.
So they have all of these sort of projections behind them, and they're able to kind of control all of the sort of visualizations behind them, as well as the music that they're making at the same time.
Yeah.
And other artists have connected them to lighting and to LEDs, all kinds of different applications. There's all of this sort of possibility. We've sort of left it really open as a technology, so that artists can do anything they want with it, really, and we give them the tools to do that, and they can kind of run with it without us being prescriptive over exactly what it does.
Wild. That's so cool. Being able to map, not just the audio, but an actual like lighting show, or to the whole stage, like basically anything that can be have a parameter. So could you remind me? So you talked a little bit about like the interface between, you have like a Wi-Fi connection between the gloves that goes to the computer, and then it's like a app, or is it a plugin, or like how does that interface with the other applications on the computer?
Yeah, so our software on the computer receives all this Wi-Fi data from the glove. You can then connect your gestures to, let's say, like a MIDI message, for example.
Okay.
Which can then be sent to Ableton Live, or it can be sent to your hardware synthesizer, or whatever it is. So our software just appears like a MIDI interface.
Cool. Okay.
And then, or you can connect to something called an OSC message, which is like it was sort of invented in the 90s, I believe. And it's far superior to MIDI, but has failed to replace it. But it's like you can send it wirelessly. You can send all kinds of messages, and it's really useful to control things like visuals or other sort of technologies that need to be interfaced with. So you can write some custom software if that's the kind of thing you want to do.
Cool. This is kind of like top of mind for me right now. We just built out a live production studio for like broadcasting, and so I've been exploring tools like Bit Focus Companion and like mapping things to control the videos and the recording gear and the setup. And so, I mean, this idea of being able to like map the gloves and the gestures to like, different things you can do. I'm even imagining like potentially using that for a live production tool for the cyclorama room that we have downstairs for like hosting these virtual events. Cool.
We've definitely put our emphasis on live performance to begin with. I guess it kind of makes sense because there's a big visual aspect with it. But there are. I mean, I was talking to a recording engineer about a week ago, and he's really keen to use something like this in his studio to do, some really expressive automation lanes, or to be able to sort of even just interact with his sort of DAW in a more kind of sort of natural way, if that makes sense. But so there's definitely there's a recording context as well, I think. But
awesome. Man, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on. I know you've been kind of like really hyper focused on creating this amazing product, and I'm curious, as we kind of like zoom out and we look at the future of where things are headed, what your perspective would be on like the future of performance or the future of creativity. I mean, in particular, like as it relates to, like VR and 3D as well, or how, let's love to hear your thoughts in general about like the future of expressive performance for artists.
Yeah, I mean, the sort of venturing into 3D space and the idea for sort of virtual environments, I think there's a lot of exciting potential there. It's obviously there's this disconnect now slightly between the push to get these headsets out to people. I have one myself, and I think it's incredible, but the uptake is still not there enough, so that if you do your online performance, you normally don't quite have a critical mass of people.
Yeah, it's like right on it feels like it's not quite there yet in terms of like adoption, but you got to imagine that very soon.
Yeah.
Curious if you had to guess, like what would you think is like a time frame for when, I don't know, like is as common as us like having a cell phone device?
Well, I mean, without showing my age too much, I remember first trying VR back in the mid-90s there's like a big area called the Trocadero in London here, and that's now it's 30 years later. So but at the time you were like, wow, this is going to be surely within 5 years we're all going to be doing everything every day with this. I don't know. I mean, I wonder if like all good technologies, it isn't going to become replacing our interaction with everything, because purely for the reason that it's so isolating, and once you cut yourself off from the current world that you're in, that kind of makes it very difficult. So until that problem is solved, it's quite difficult to go in and out of that world in the way that I can with my phone. I'm here, I'm interacting with someone, and I'm back again. I can even do that in the middle of a conversation with someone, if that makes sense, which is rude, but people do it all the time. So I think that for people to enter this space, I think it might have its own world, and it might be a bit more niche than we think it is going to be. I think it'll be incredible, but I think we're still waiting to get to that point where that kind of an environment is desired as much as people want to have with the way they interact with their phones, or the way they watch films, or other media that is more kind of pervasive in that way.
Makes sense. It's super interesting. I mean, I try to kind of just like take stock every once in a while when I'm doing something like this and we're having a conversation like remotely, that we have this like little portal on our screens that's like magically, cyberspace tunneling to across the world. And somehow like magically we're like communicating in a way that was like witchcraft to someone 1,000 years ago. And what I'm hearing you say is that, there's with this type of technology, right now, there's not this like a mass adoption. And also like, there's, as this technology becomes more pervasive, we also it might not be as desirable as just like spending time in the quote unquote real world and disconnecting. And I mean, there are a lot of like negative consequences or like downsides of like spending too much time right now in like the quote unquote cyberspace or on the internet. We can certainly like lose ourselves in it. It can disconnect us from nature and from each other and our communities. But it is interesting to explore like maybe part of the issue is that we don't have as like present, the presence isn't quite there. Like most of the time that we are spending on the internet isn't like this. I mean, I feel like this is like high quality connection time on the internet because we're here together, we're sharing space, we're having conversation. This is some like prime connection internet usage. But like most internet usage, like 99% is like people, posturing on social media and like wanting to create an impression on their ego. And then it's like, that feels like that's maybe more of the issue than this. And like, this feels like amazing. Like we're able to connect in ways that just wouldn't have been possible before. I guess the same thing with social media too, but
I think the idea of like virtual, if you can, the problem again, you're wearing this, headset, but if you couldn't somehow transplant yourself into a virtual space, which I know some of the developers are working on this.
Yeah. Or like a Neuralink, going into those questions again about like, who do we trust with like a chip in our brain too, but also, yeah.
But I think the one of the issues is that like, technology is good when it answers a question in society. And one of the things with VR, VR is undoubtedly incredible technology. But it's not yet. It's been pushed always from the technological side, and I think we haven't quite got to the point where it's got a need in society that is filling a gap for. And until it gets to that point, it is going to probably remain a sort of slightly niche fringe thing. So that connection needs to be made. You can see why a phone answers a thing in society, as well as being an incredible piece of miniaturized technology. So.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, like what's the function of those? Like right now, the function is less of a need and it's more of like a nice to have, or it's like cool, or it's kind of like, entertaining. But how do we value just like entertainment or better experience when like the actual function of what we need through this communication, we're able to do through the devices we currently have? Yeah, that's a good point.
I think there's also, I'm really going the whole hog on this, but there's also a sort of tendency from any technology company to explain that the thing that they're building is going to be pervasive and absolutely everyone in the world is going to have their device or to need that in their life. And that actually is kind of okay to build something that's really cool, but quite niche. I mean, it's difficult if that has a, multi-billion-dollar upfront investment cost, but I think like so we for example with when we're talking about the gloves for musicians, like people sometimes ask me, is this going to replace all music controllers? And it's like, it's definitely not. Like music technology is brilliant because it's a sort of pluralistic, varied space, and we're probably always going to be something that's quite niche for a specific type of musician, and that's I think quite an exciting place to be, and quite I like having a conversation with the people on that basis rather than trying to explain to every musician that they need to sell all their gear and buy our products.
Right, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, if you're trying to replace everything, including like playing guitars and piano, like you'd have to figure out the mechanics of like when you feel the resistance from strumming, like, that's like an important variable. And like same thing with like playing the keys, like just replacing that is just not.
Yeah, there's no need. There's no effort. There's better places to put your effort to replace something as cool as a guitar.
Yeah, makes sense. All right. Well, I'm curious, now that you've essentially launched version 2 of your product, and it's getting out into the world. What are you most excited about in terms of like what's next for you? Like what's like the next big thing that you're thinking about? You're like, oh man, that's going to be awesome, and that you want to work on now.
So the big motivator for me is just is seeing the artists, what they do with them, because they always do something with them that I could not have thought of, and that's always a great surprise to me. And that's my favorite thing, is just going to a show and seeing them do something with it. And as a little bit of context, like when we finished the previous design, we that was right before the pandemic. So we did sort of ship out all of these first batch of gloves in the version 1, but we couldn't travel anywhere. We couldn't take these to sort of shows and try them on people. So there's been this sort of big gap where we haven't really been able to connect with people. So there are lots of them out there, and now people have been doing shows with them since the pandemic finished. But this time, hopefully, there's not an enormous pandemic about to hit us, and we can go and see lots of artists, and that's definitely my number one thing.
Awesome. Yeah, I bet that's probably an amazing feeling, kind of like giving birth to this product in the world. Now to seeing what people can create with it, the magic they're creating, be able to see the shows. Awesome. Well, man, this has been a lot of fun hearing about the gloves that you made. And I personally am very interested in picking up a pair. For anyone that's listening to this or watching this right now who's interested in learning more about the gloves or actually picking up a pair for themselves, what's the best place for them to go to learn more?
Sure. So you should go to MiMUGloves.com. So that's MiMUGloves.com. And we have that you can buy the gloves there. You can watch some videos. You can learn a bit about the history of them. There's a whole bunch of nerdy documentation if that's your thing. We have some audio plugins too. So yeah, please go and check it out. And if you've got any questions, just send us a message and we'll be happy to get back to you.
Awesome. Well, Adam, like always, we'll put the links in the show notes for easy access. And thanks for coming on the podcast today. And thank you for the work that you've put into these gloves. It sounds amazing. And I'm looking forward to playing around with them.
Brilliant. Well, thanks for having me.